woman with light brown hair runs frantically through the rain, thinking to herself that it's all over. Overwhelmed with despair, she feels she can't believe in anything anymore. Her sneakers slips on the wet pavement. Ack! She falls hard, her bag spilling fan merchandise of a beloved character across the ground. Her hand desperately reaches for a small, bunny-suited plushie lying in a puddle. She gently picks up the soaked plushie. Tears stream down her face as she clutches the doll, whispering the name, Charles. She recalls her life as an otaku, devoted to a particular Otone game character. In a happier time, she smiles lovingly at a plushie of her favorite character. The character, Charles, is depicted in all his glory, surrounded by shimmering blue roses. A sudden game notification announces the release of the final scenario. Her initial excitement quickly turns to wide-eyed horror. She stares at her phone in utter devastation, tears welling in her eyes. Back in the present, sitting alone in the rain, she grieves that her favorite character has died. She corrects her previous thought, realizing he didn't simply die. Tapping to read the final chapter, she sees a scene of a red-haired woman holding a gun to a defeated Charles. The red-haired woman smiles with cruel triumph as she takes aim. Beaten but defiant, Charles glares up at his aggressor, who calls out his name. A gunshot rings out through the darkness. The terrible truth is confirmed. He was murdered. The victorious red-haired woman drops the gun, a sinister grin on her face. The woman sobs, lamenting that if only she had been by his side. Clutching the plushie tightly, she cries out that she would have protected him. As she grieves, a brilliant light suddenly rushes toward her through the rain. A voice calls out, Leia, as someone else complains she overslept for the entrance ceremony. Leia, now with white hair, resists waking up in a world where Charles no longer exists. Asked if she's still half asleep, Leia is seen with two other students, looking dazed. Her name is shouted again as she's revealed to be sleeping soundly inside a coffin. Yawn. Leia sits up groggily, wondering if someone was calling her. A man with striking white and black hair and a blindfold stands before her, appearing to be an authority figure. Looking around the magnificent hall, Leia explains she was mourning her beloved Charles. The moment hangs in the air before reality shifts. The authority figure sighs, informing Leia that she is now a student at the school. He reveals the shocking truth. She is at Twilight Academy, the magic school for vampires. The name of the school, Twilight Academy, is formally presented in a grand reveal. Leia finds herself surrounded by other students in a magical hall filled with floating candles and bats. Completely bewildered, Leia panics and shouts, demanding to know what is happening. She observes the fantastical scene, moving portraits, floating candles, and a principal in a rather silly outfit. Recognizing a scene from the game Princes of Darkness, Leia sees her favorite character and blushes deeply. Her heart pounds with excitement as a hopeful possibility dawns on her. Flustered and hopeful, she wonders if this means what she thinks it means. Overwhelmed with love, she begins to admire the man's flawless features, from his face to his hands. Her admiration continues as she notes his impeccable style, even while seated. Convinced beyond a doubt, she realizes every detail matches perfectly. She joyfully confirms his identity. Her favorite character, Charles Knightley, is real and right in front of her. Yeah. An explosion of pure fangirl joy erupts from her. Deciding this must be a dream, Leia ecstatically resolves to live in it forever. She gazes up at Charles Knightley on his throne and thinks, if this is a dream, a thought forms in her mind, wondering if it would be okay for her to pursue her desires here. Charles Knightley sits on his throne, lost in thought. Gulp. Leia stares with starstruck, drooling adoration. A student suddenly points in alarm, yelling for everyone to look. As onlookers question what she is doing, Leia runs up the stairs toward Charles. The other students whisper among themselves, wondering which dorm she belongs to. Charles opens his eyes, his gaze sharp and focused as he notices the approaching commotion. Gazing at the scene before her, a blushing Leia marvels that it all looks so real. The sheer realism of the moment makes her head spin. Charles watches her approach with a stern, unimpressed expression. Determined not to waste this opportunity, Leia steals her resolve. She confidently points at Charles and gets his attention. He glares down at her, coldly asking what she is doing before ordering her to get down. His thoughts trail off as he internally scolds her for causing a scene during the ceremony. Brimming with pure joy, Leia ignores his command and extends her hand for a handshake. She playfully pokes a bewildered Charles on the cheek. The students below are frozen in shock at her audacious behavior. The ceremony descends into chaos as students react, and the headmaster rushes in to restrain Leia. Leia is surprised by the sudden intervention but still lost in her excitement. She excitedly declares to Charles that her dream is extraordinary. Grabbing her wrist, Charles sternly demands to know what she thinks she is doing. A jolt of shock runs through Leia as the situation turns serious. Two students grab Leia, reprimanding her for disrespecting the dorm director. The headmaster intervenes, calling out to Miss Leia and demanding to know what she is doing. He leans closer, asking what kind of desires she is experiencing in her dreams. Other students find his fury odd. While Leia realizes there has been a misunderstanding, the headmaster furiously announces a 60-point deduction for delaying the ritual and disrespecting a dorm director. A gasp echoes through the hall as students express shock at the massive penalty on the first day. Leia, however, is ecstatic, realizing the screening ritual is about to begin. The headmaster seems taken aback and flustered by her unexpected excitement. He regains his composure and gestures dramatically, preparing to assign Leia to her dormitory. He presents the categorization rose, instructing her to let it choose her fate, much to her delight. Leia beams with excitement, recognizing the familiar sorting mechanic from the game. In her mind, she excitedly begins to explain the three splendid dormitories of Twilight Academy. First is Gilles de Reyes' dormitory for disciplined knights, which she happily notes is her favorite. Next is Tepes' dormitory, a wild kingdom of kings. Finally, there's Bathory's dormitory, a fabulous garden for dog lovers. Back in the hall, Leia clasps her hands and prays to be sorted into her favorite character's dormitory. She eagerly reaches her hand toward the enchanted rose. Members of the Gilles de Reyes dorm pray that she doesn't end up with them. She winces as her finger is pricked by a thorn on the rose. A single drop of blood falls from her fingertip as Charles watches. The other students watch the ritual with quiet anticipation. Leia is surprised by the unexpected sharpness of the pain. The pain feels so real, yet she can't seem to wake up from what she believes is a dream. A chilling possibility begins to form in her mind. This might not be a dream after all. The horrifying realization strikes her. She may have actually transmigrated into the game's world. As she panics, the headmaster shouts in disbelief as the rose turns a brilliant white. Leia stares in wide-eyed shock at the impossible white rose. Students murmur in confusion, confirming that a white dormitory does not exist. An ominous voice begins to recount a forgotten tale. The ominous tale continues as a mysterious voice speaks to a tense Leia. A thought reveals the shocking truth. The student from the old tale was not a vampire. A woman with red pigtails smirks, revealing they claimed the student was a human, much to Leia's horror. The woman is dramatically revealed as the voice identifies her, Carmilla. Crash, a vase of flowers shatters, mirroring the abrupt tension as Leia flinches. Suddenly, Leia finds herself surrounded by other students, their intentions unclear. A menacing red eye glares as Leia realizes she is the center of everyone's intense gaze. Carmilla stands over a coffin, coldly telling Leia she has ruined the entrance ceremony. She smiles, holding the white rose that sealed Leia's strange fate. With a predatory gleam in her eye, Carmilla provocatively asks if tonight's dinner could be Leia. Leia glares back, sweating but defiant in the face of the threat. The three dorm directors watch from their platforms as the tension in the hall escalates. A red-haired dorm director grins with sharp fangs, clearly enjoying the spectacle. A blonde-haired dorm director observes with a thoughtful, amused expression. Charles remains stoic and observant, as someone thinks his name. Carmilla recounts the legend of the White Rose, whose chosen pupil had their blood sucked by gleeful students. As menacing students close in, the story concludes that the human pupil became that day's dinner. The red-haired dorm director watches Leia with a hungry, predatory smile. The blonde-haired dorm director also smirks, intrigued by the unfolding drama. Charles looks on with a stern and unreadable expression, his thoughts hidden. Leia panics, questioning if she's truly human in a world of vampires. A feast is explained as a way for vampires to suppress their desires and survive without consuming blood. But Luluria understands that, for them, drinking blood is still a powerful intuitive urge. Peeking over a pew, she steels her resolve, knowing one thing is more important than anything. Two students grin maliciously, noting that human blood is said to be tasty, causing Luluria to yelp in fear. More students with hungry, glowing eyes turn their attention toward her as a foot steps forward. A student looms over her, grabbing her chin with a menacing aura. He flashes a fanged smile as Luluria stares in disbelief, thinking, no way. In her moment of peril, Luluria blushes, lamenting that she never even got a proper talk with Charles. A hand suddenly reaches out as Luluria looks up in surprise. Charles steps forward, admonishing the crowd for their noisy and vulgar behavior during the solemn ceremony. He calmly addresses them as fellow vampires. Standing between Luluria and the others, he warns them not to lose their senses over something so trivial. Luluria is completely stunned and flustered by his sudden intervention. Charles turns his sharp gaze to Carmilla, telling her not to interfere and to back up. She playfully dismisses his command, insisting she was only joking. Luluria is caught in the middle, her shock palpable as she glances at Charles. Charles holds his ground, his expression serious and unwavering. The reality of the situation hits Luluria, and she breaks out in a panicked blush. Her mind short-circuits with pure joy as she internally screams that her favorite character is walking and talking. She clutches her chest, overwhelmed by the thought of him getting new art and vocal lines in real life. Crying out, "Precious," she faints dramatically as a concerned. Charles asks if she's okay. He looks down at her unconscious form with genuine worry on his face. "Oh my," a voice remarks, as two other dorm directors observe the scene with amusement. The two figures approach slowly, their different styles of footwear on display. One wonders aloud if the pure and noble knight, Charles, is planning to take the human's blood, all for himself. A man named Alistair Redfield notes that she's kind of cute on closer look. Charles scoffs in disgust, telling Aliska not to compare him to the likes of him. Aliska introduces Takia Bradbury, who asks if Charles likes Luluria, but Charles insists he was only performing his duty as a dorm director. Aliska smiles coyly while Takia appears bored and unimpressed. Takia leans over Luluria with a sharp grin, inviting the startled girl to his Tepe's dormitory. He menacingly offers to make her a mythical blood bag, an offer that Lulur unexpectedly finds overwhelmingly charming. Aliska interrupts, taking her hand and promising to treat her like a princess, which she finds horrifically handsome. He gently kisses her hand as sparkles fill the air. A sinister thought reveals that drinking human blood offers unparalleled beauty advantages. Eek, Luluria yelps as Aliska licks his lips after kissing her hand. Charles sighs in exasperation, covering his face in annoyance. He realizes aloud that the current situation has become far too dangerous. A blushing Luluria looks around in stunned confusion, wondering what is happening. Her heart pounds as she becomes completely flustered by the attention. Charles internally deems her a harmful creature as she looks back in wide-eyed shock. He snaps his fingers, summoning two students to deal with the situation. What? To his surprise, the students carry Lulur away in a coffin, as the other dorm directors watch with amusement. The scene transitions to a small, isolated cabin in a dark forest at night. Inside the cabin, Luluria lies in the coffin, wondering how she ended up there. She concludes that she has transmigrated into the game's world, but worries that a character named Lurea never existed. Her worry is quickly replaced by pure fangirl joy as she gushes over seeing Charles in real life, finding the experience overwhelmingly perfect. Clutching a book, she resolves to follow the game's scenario, but is chilled by the memory of Carmilla vowing to kill her. She stares in shock, realizing that if the story proceeds as planned, Charles is fated to die in a year, just before graduation. Her expression hardens with worry and determination. Startled by a sudden noise, her eyes dart to the side in alarm. The sound of approaching footsteps echoes from just outside the door. An alert flashes as she realizes someone is coming, and a figure appears at the doorway. A man searches the room, muttering that he's certain he hid something there. From within the coffin, Lulurea watches as a cross-shaped shadow falls across her. The man grins wickedly, holding up a small, glowing potion he has found. Lulurea's eyes widen in horror as she recognizes the vial of holy water. She suddenly remembers the critical event that takes place right after the entrance ceremony. Bang! She slams her hands against the inside of the coffin lid. Gritting her teeth, She struggles to push the heavy lid open. The coffin rattles and shakes from her desperate efforts inside. With fierce determination, she resolves to escape, get to Gilles de Ray's dormitory, and save Charles. Chapter 4 concludes with a promotional image of Charles holding a flustered Leia. Leia recalls the name of the critical upcoming event. A title card announces the next scenario. Card number 006, Suspicious Tea Time. Recalling the event, Takia taunts someone for narrowly avoiding death by holy water, while Charles accuses them of brewing the tea, identifying it as the Tea Party incident. The image of a teapot and cup flashes, as Leia realizes with panic that Charles is in danger. Pushing against the coffin lid, she insists that she isn't joking. She strains against her confinement, vowing she won't let her favorite character die and will never forgive his enemies. Bursting from the coffin, she passionately screams that love always wins. She lands forcefully, her boots cracking the wooden floor beneath her. Looking around the unfamiliar hall, she frantically questions where she is. Standing alone in the vast, empty corridor, she panics. She sprints through the academy, marveling at the bat couriers and magical cleaning gadgets. Recognizing the entrance to Gilles de Ray's dormitory, she runs toward it, impressed by its flashy appearance. With a look of grim determination, she reminds herself to hurry before Charles falls into serious danger. The scene transitions with an image of beautiful, glowing white roses. The scene shifts to a grand, welcoming party hosted by one of the dormitories. Students are seen socializing over tea amidst a flourish of beautiful white roses. A shocking vision reveals Charles choking in agony, poisoned by holy water, as Leia gasps in horror. Leia finds herself in an unfamiliar hallway, where a student quickly takes notice of her. Recognizing her as the human from the ceremony, he grabs her with a predatory smile. She stares back, her eyes wide with fear and surprise at his sudden aggression. The student is utterly flustered by her intensity as she insists that the situation is critical. Now shaking two students, she frantically proclaims that her favorite character's life is on the line. Terrified, the student finally points her in the right direction, and she follows his lead. She arrives at the dormitory, stopping before a pair of magnificent, guarded, golden doors. Her jaw drops as she takes in the impressive sight before her. Inside, Charles looks out a window, his thoughts turning to the mysterious human girl. Elsewhere, Leia celebrates with pure, unadulterated, fangirl joy. Charles continues to ponder, trying to recall where he might have seen her before. The scene shifts to Charles formally addressing the new first-year students at the welcoming party. Holding a teacup, he introduces himself as the dormitory head of Gilles de Ray. Two identically dressed students sit side by side, listening attentively. While looking at a portrait of a valiant ancestor, Charles reflects on the high expectations he must meet. He raises his cup with a slight smile, officially welcoming the new students to the dorm. Then Leia suddenly bursts into the room, arms outstretched, as she screams for everyone to stop. She lunges forward, slapping the teacup from Charles's hand and yelling at him not to drink it. The other students cry out in shock and concern for their dormitory head. A close-up reveals her hand is now bleeding, cut by the shattered porcelain. A student notices the injury, pointing in shock and shouting that she's bleeding. Leia ignores the pain, knowing that her own injury is irrelevant right now. Grabbing onto a stunned Charles, she anxiously asks if he is all right. He looks down, confirming with surprise that he hadn't yet taken a drink. A wave of relief washes over her, and she beams, overjoyed that he's safe. Suddenly, an unseen student bellows with fury. "How dare you!" The student who first found her in the hall now glares with rage, baring his fangs. Charles attempts to intervene, but Leia just looks up at him with a confused expression. Another student chops her on the head, scolding her for disrespecting Lord Charles as she laments her reward. He then fusses over an extremely annoyed Charles, checking to see if he was harmed. Dazed on the floor, Leia looks blissfully overwhelmed by the entire chaotic encounter. Charles's expression grows serious as he gestures toward the spilled liquid on the floor. His eyes widen in realization as he recognizes the substance: holy water. A student reaches for the puddle and cries out in pain as it burns his hand, prompting Charles to yell, "Don't touch." He explains to the horrified students that the liquid will burn their skin. Charles stares grimly at the floor, the gravity of the assassination attempt finally sinking in. Two students hold up a dazed Leia, who is seeing stars and bats. Overwhelmed by the stress and her injury, she finally passes out. The other students watch, stunned, as one girl looks on with clear admiration. He carries her from the hall, her expression peaceful despite the recent chaos. The students whisper among themselves, relieved that their dormitory head was ultimately unharmed. However, the memory of her blood's potent scent lingers in one student's mind. He muses that if he were in Charles's position, his self-control would have failed, and he would have attacked. His barely suppressed vampiric hunger shows on his face, a testament to Charles's incredible restraint. The chapter ends with a thank you to the series' supporters and staff. Badump. LuLaReia's heart pounds as she stares in shock, held in Charles's arms. Internally, she bursts into tears of pure joy, overwhelmed by the feeling of being held by her favorite character. She recognizes the fresh scent of Lily of the Valley with an undertone of bitter citrus emanating from him. In a flash of recognition, she realizes it's the exact scent of the official Charles-themed perfume from the game. While worrying if she's too heavy, her internal scales of reason and desire sway back and forth. With a serious expression, he announces that he has questions for her regarding the holy water and her background. A brand new school uniform magically appears before LuLaReia as she sits on the bed. Charles turns away, looking out a window as he gives her privacy to change. She watches him go with a pensive look. LuLaReia contemplates the situation, touching her chin thoughtfully. Clenching her fists, she gushes internally over how cool he is, just as she expected. Charles stands by the window, his back to her, seemingly lost in thought. He blushes fiercely, covering his mouth as he fights to control his reaction to her blood scent. Having bandaged her hand, LuLaReia confidently declares that the small injury is fine now. She sits up on the bed with a determined expression, ready for what comes next. A powerful resolve flashes through her mind. She will alter Charles's destiny. After successfully changing the tea time scenario, she wonders who the real culprit could be. Her thoughts are interrupted as her reflection in an ornate mirror begins to slip and distort. She stares in shock as something seems to emerge from the mirror, a dark, bat-like creature. A sinister voice calls out her name, LuLaReia, causing her to whip around in alarm. A monstrous, one-eyed bat demon hovers in the air, beckoning her to come closer. Her eyes glow red as she looks up, utterly terrified by the sudden appearance of the creature. She senses that the mirror is calling to her as shadowy tendrils erupt from its surface and reach for her. The tendrils ensnare her as a disembodied voice whispers that it has been waiting for a long time. Slide! Just as she is about to be pulled into the mirror, a hand suddenly reaches through to grab her. Charles appears, holding her back from the mirror's dark pull in a swirl of blue roses. He unleashes a brilliant blast of light from his hand toward the cursed mirror. With a powerful burst of magic, he completely shatters the demonic mirror, saving her. A shard of glass grazes LuLaReia's cheek, leaving a small cut. Ah! She looks up at her savior, stunned by the dramatic rescue. Charles stands amid the broken glass, confirming that the entity he was expecting has arrived. He identifies the creature as Whips, a demon that lures people into mirrors, causing LuLaReia to shiver in fear. He turns to her with a look of intense scrutiny. He questions how she, a human, could possibly know about a demon like Whips. LuLaReia looks back at him, completely bewildered by his pointed question. He pulls her into a tight embrace, surrounded by an aura of magical roses. Startled but secretly thrilled, she looks up at him with a deep blush. He suddenly pushes her down. A loud sound effect emphasizes his forceful movement. Charles pins a stunned LuLaReia onto the bed. He leans over her, trapping her arm with his hand as she stares up in a daze. Despite this situation, her inner fangirl celebrates the incredible close-up view. The moment is framed like a perfect 4K recording, capturing his handsome, determined face. LuLaReia becomes increasingly flustered as he leans in close to her neck. She gasps in shock as his face gets dangerously close to her skin. He bites down on her neck, causing her to cry out in surprise. LuLaReia watches in stunned silence as Charles pulls back, his vampiric fangs now visible. Overwhelmed with shame and struggling for control, he clutches his head in his hands. Her eyes widen in horror as she finally understands the meaning of his state. Bloodlust. She gasps, her hand hovering near her neck as the reality of the situation sinks in. Bam! With a surge of uncontrolled strength, Charles throws her back onto the bed. He struggles visibly, his face flushed and sweating as he fights his primal instincts. Blushing furiously, LuLaReia wears a dazed but strangely excited smile. As he hovers over her, she internally celebrates how incredibly close his face is. Completely lost in her fangirl mindset, she gushes over his long eyelashes. With a pained expression, Charles reaches a trembling hand toward her neck. His fingers gently graze her cheek, and her eyes widen in startled anticipation. Pushing against his chest, she frantically pleads, "No, Charles, you need to calm down." He looks down at her with glowing eyes and bared fangs, lost in his vampiric haze. He cups her face, his gaze intense as he prepares to give in to his hunger. To his surprise, she closes her eyes and shouts, "Yes, drink as much as you need." Her mind fixates on one thing as she stares up at him: his fangs. From over his shoulder, she watches him with a blush, still caught in the moment. Her fangirl fantasy comes to a screeching halt as a single thought cuts through. "Wait!" Quote. Tadask, Charles recoils with a frustrated click of his tongue, battling for control. Leia recalls from the game that Charles hates drinking blood because of his family's curse, the frenzy. The curse is rarely triggered, but when activated by bloodlust, the consequences are devastating. A terrifying flashback shows a person in the throes of the frenzy attacking others in a dark room. It destroys everything until nothing, and no one is left alive, a tragedy a young Charles witnessed firsthand. He lost many family members during one of those frenzies, a trauma that left him scarred. Realizing he would never be happy about this, she calls his name with newfound determination. She grabs his face with both hands, forcing him to meet her gaze. "Hang in there," she yells, not wanting him to wake up filled with sadness and regret. Her heartfelt plea seems to reach him, as a flicker of his true self returns to his eyes. Gritting his teeth, Charles struggles against the urge, as she looks on with deep concern. A sudden splash of blood erupts, accompanied by a sharp, tearing sound. Horrified, she looks up at him, calling his name in fear. He pulls back, wiping blood from his own mouth. He bit himself to regain his senses. She panics when she sees him bleeding, but he dismisses it as a small cut. Using her game knowledge, she tells him there's a blue bottle on the shelf that can help. "Wait here, I'll be right back," she declares, dashing off to find the cure. She searches the shelves, recalling that the medicine to suppress bloodlust should be here somewhere. "Got it," she exclaims triumphantly as she grabs the glowing blue bottle. Charles drinks the potion, his breathing steadying as the medicine takes effect. He softly apologizes for worrying her as she sighs, relieved the crisis is over. His expression hardens as he turns his head, his demeanor shifting back to serious. A close-up highlights the Gilles de Rais crest pinned to his uniform. Leia cries with joy, internally squealing that his embarrassed face is adorable. Now dressed in her new school uniform, she smiles, pleased with her appearance. She twirls happily, showing off her stylish new outfit against a backdrop of purple roses. Charles closes his eyes, ashamed of how close he came to succumbing to the frenzy. Leia laughs nervously, thinking she might die before saving Charles, but decides it's worth it. In a lavish office, Charles addresses her as Miss Leia, while a mysterious figure sits at a desk. The figure is revealed to be a formidable man with white hair and a lace blindfold. He announces that he has summoned her and the 3 dorm heads, gesturing to 2 empty silhouettes beside Charles. Meanwhile, a red-haired man named Leia naps peacefully in a vibrant field of flowers. Nearby, a stylish man with blonde hair adjusts his glove, smirking at his peers' laziness. The blindfolded headmaster sighs in chibi form, lamenting that the other 2 dorm heads are far too carefree. He forces a nervous laugh, overwhelmed by their antics. Returning to his serious demeanor, he redirects the meeting back to the main problem at hand. Leia looks up nervously, asking what their discussion means for her. He begins to explain the great danger she poses to them, even with the smallest injury. His words make her recall the cut on her hand and Charles's terrifying loss of control. Charles stands beside her, his expression grim as he agrees with the assessment. The headmaster touches his chin, preparing to announce their final verdict. He declares that they have decided to send her back to the human world, leaving Leia utterly shocked. A comical chibi sequence imagines her being zapped away through a magical portal. He explains a barrier separates the worlds and she can never return, but his words only fill her with dread. She panics, realizing that if she's sent back, her mission to save Charles will fail. With desperate resolve, she prepares to do anything to convince them to let her stay. She turns her pleading gaze directly toward Charles, hoping he will intervene. The headmaster asks Charles for his final opinion as the dorm head, who pauses to consider his answer. The room falls silent as Charles begins to speak. The question of whether to send her back hangs heavily in the air. Charles's profile is tense and serious as he comes to a decision. He states grimly that vampires and humans cannot coexist, glancing at his own bandaged hand. Clenching his fist, he adds that they will only end up hurting one another. He concludes that sending her back is for her own good, a decision that devastates Leia. The headmaster nods in agreement, stating that it is the most logical conclusion. Leia's determination hardens as she silently rejects his decision. She vows to stay no matter what, so she can change his tragic ending. Suddenly, the ornate office door creaks open, interrupting the solemn moment. The blonde-haired man from before saunters in with a dazzling, carefree smile. He casually explains his tardiness, admitting he couldn't decide what to wear. Bathory's dorm head, Eliska Redfield, strikes a dramatic pose, blaming his lateness on fashion advice. Lightning seems to crackle around his boots as he steps forward with an imposing aura. He stops before Charles, and a palpable tension fills the space between them. Eliska smirks, taunting Charles by saying that dogs are good at waiting, so no apology is needed. Charles's eyes flash with anger as he warns Eliska to stop his petty provocations. Crackle. The intense atmosphere makes Leia and the headmaster shrink back in fear. Eliska completely ignores Charles, turning his attention to Leia with a charming smile. He smoothly apologizes to her, saying that even a second is too long to keep a lady waiting. After everyone is seated, the headmaster informs Eliska of their decision to send Leia home. Eliska casually suggests the process will take about a week, causing a shocked Leia to blurt out, "What?" Charles explains that the magic for her return is complex and will require time to prepare. Leia breathes a sigh of relief, grateful she isn't leaving immediately. Her relief fades as she realizes a week is not nearly enough time to save Charles from his fate. The headmaster announces that until then, one of the 3 dormitories must take her in. Before anyone can respond, Eliska throws his arm around a startled Leia and eagerly volunteers. Surrounded by a magical aura of yellow roses, he grandly declares, "I'll take you in." He gives her a dazzling smile and officially welcomes her to the Bathory dormitory. Leaning close, he whispers a promise that no one will bother her under his protection. He gently tilts her chin up, his face just inches from hers as she blushes furiously. Overwhelmed by his forwardness, Leia can only stare back with wide, flustered eyes. Eliska's fangs glint as he smirks, promising to show her experiences humans can't even dream of. Leaning closer, Eliska whispers that he will tell her his secrets when they are alone. Leia gasps, completely flustered by his intimate and suggestive promise. Charles glares, his expression hardening with clear disapproval of Eliska's actions. Wham! Charles forcefully pulls Eliska's hand away from Leia, intervening directly. Eliska scoffs at the insult, arguing that beauty is all that matters to him, human or vampire. He then smugly reminds Charles that it is against the rules to interfere with other dormitories. Charles retorts that she isn't his student, leaving them at a tense impasse as Leia worries. A spark of an idea forms in Leia's mind as she looks on with sudden clarity. She slams her hands on the desk, calling out directly to the headmaster to get his attention. With unwavering conviction, Leia declares that she will go to the Gilles de Rais dormitory. Charles is visibly taken aback by her sudden and decisive choice. Why? Eliska asks in annoyance, complaining that staying with a robot like Charles will be boring. Leia clenches her fist, internally weighing what she can possibly accomplish in only a week. She remembers a key phrase Charles used in the game, a memory that fuels her resolve. Her mind flashes to an image of Charles, activating a powerful ability with a magic voice command. Inspired, she boldly states that where there's a will, there's a way, and she wants to protect Charles. Her passionate declaration leaves both Charles and Eliska completely stunned into silence. Eliska bursts out laughing, finding it absurd that she wants to protect Charles when she needs protection herself. He mockingly asks if she intends to be Charles's knight in shining armor should he cause trouble. The question hangs in the air, prompting a moment of quiet contemplation from Charles. Having made his decision, Charles announces that she will stay at Gilles de Rais for the week. Eliska looks on with a thoughtful smirk, seemingly accepting the outcome. Charles and a nervous Leia exchange a glance, the decision now settled. Leia realizes There are still unanswered questions she needs to address. She panics internally, suspecting it's about the tea incident that triggered his bloodlust. Taking her hand, Charles firmly states they will respect her decision, putting an end to the discussion. As Charles begins to lead her away, Leia calls his name, while Aliska watches them leave. Charles and Leia walk down a long, ornate hallway lined with portraits. He stops and turns to her, formally stating that they will prepare a room for her in his dormitory. Looking away with a troubled expression, Charles begins to confess his feelings about the incident. He admits that while physical wounds heal, the emotional scar of what he almost did will remain. Vowing to repay her for saving him, Charles promises to protect her until she returns home. Thump thump. His sincere vow makes her heart pound as she blushes furiously. She stares with wide, dazed eyes, trying to process his unexpected declaration. As they arrive at a large set of doors, Charles adds that she'll be living in the same room as him. He explains his reasoning. There is no place safer for her than by his side in his room. Zap! The shocking news sends her ghostly chibi form into a state of electrified panic. The next morning, sunlight streams through a window as a small bird sings on a branch. Leia awakens in a comfortable bed, stretching peacefully after her night's rest. She gets ready for the day, buttoning up the shirt of her new school uniform. A close-up highlights the intricate magical circle design on her stylish new skirt. She adjusts her hair in the mirror, her reflection showing her still processing recent events. Now fully dressed, she strikes a happy pose, delighted with her sparkling new look. In the kitchen, Charles is seen from behind, busily preparing something. He turns with a gentle smile, noticing she is awake, and greeting her warmly. A close-up reveals his handsome face, softened by a slight charming blush. He gently guides a bewildered Leia to a seat at a table set for breakfast. She is utterly dumbfounded, drooling at the sight of the meal he has prepared for her. The beautifully arranged breakfast consists of sausage, eggs, and buttered toast. Munch, munch. Leia enthusiastically devours her breakfast, as Charles warns her not to eat so quickly. When she insists he eat too, Charles looks up from his cup and asks if she means him. He begins to respond, a gentle and understanding smile forming on his face. Charles rests his chin on his hand, warmly stating that watching her enjoy her meal is enough for him. Completely flustered, Leia insists he can't say things like that, and needs to eat properly as well. Posing with a sausage on her fork, she cheerfully exclaims what a lovely morning it is. Charles smiles and gestures broadly, agreeing that it is indeed a beautiful sight. The mood shifts as Charles, now in formal attire, turns to her with a serious expression to get her attention. He stands behind a startled Leia, his demeanor stern, as his brooch emits a sudden golden light. Now standing before a grand door, Charles crosses his arms and asks how long she intends to wait outside. Leia panics, wondering what happened to their wonderfully happy breakfast together. A confused chibi Charles questions her panic, reminding her that she has not even stepped inside the room. She recalls the headmaster's decision to send her back to the human world in 1 week. She then remembers Charles stating she would stay with him, realizing it was so shocking she'd mistaken it for a daydream. In Charles's room, she yells in disbelief, and he calmly confirms that she is correct. Her mind races with excited rants about her good luck, leaving Charles to wonder why she's talking so fast. Feeling overwhelmed by the turn of events, she laments that she could have just stared at his door for hours. Puzzled by her strange behavior, Charles simply announces that he's going in. Driven by intense curiosity, she scrambles after him, declaring that she will enter with him. As they step through the doorway together, she looks around with wide-eyed wonder. She is left blushing and speechless as she takes in the sight of his incredibly grand and opulent room. Pat Charles calmly walks over to a piece of furniture and interacts with it. The view pans over the room's luxurious contents, including a fine table and an ornate chessboard. Her brain lights up, buzzing with excitement over all the new information she's learning about her crush. Surrounded by a shimmering, cosmic aura, she feels completely overwhelmed by the experience. A soft click sounds as Charles turns back toward her with a questioning look. He asks what she is doing, and her ghostly form claims she is becoming one with the wall, prompting his concern. A moment of calm settles as he pours a cup of hot tea. He asks if she's calmed down, and though she trembles while insisting she's fine, he knows it's not true. She stares at her own reflection in the teacup, still marveling that he made it for her. She gently raises the cup, and takes a quiet sip of the tea. A look of pure bliss crosses her face as she savors the delicious taste. Across from her, Charles waits patiently with his eyes closed, observing her reaction. Her blissful moment ends as she looks up with a puzzled, "Huh." Getting his attention, she calls out to Charles while he holds his teacup. His eyes widen in shock when she asks if he doesn't usually add sugar to his tea. The teacup sits on its saucer, the tense moment hanging between them. She remembers a crucial detail from the game's tea party feature. He takes exactly 2 sugar cubes. A memory of the game's user interface shows the prompt to add sugar cubes for Charles. Gasps. She freezes, realizing she has revealed knowledge she should not possess. She internally panics, knowing it's weird for her to know his secret sweet tooth is information from the game. Charles looks down, his expression unreadable as he processes her strange comment. His gaze suddenly sharpens with piercing suspicion. He confronts her directly, pointing out she knows things she shouldn't, and reveals he's never told anyone he takes sugar. Leaning forward with an intense and serious expression, Charles presses the issue further. He recalls that she also wasn't surprised by the existence of vampires at the ceremony hall. Leia looks down, feeling cornered and unable to explain herself. He adds that she knew a secret about him that he himself hadn't realized, causing her to stare back in fear. With nowhere left for her to hide, Charles looks her dead in the eye and commands, "Tell me everything." His suspicion boiling over, Charles demands to know who she really is and why she's at the academy. Stunned by the directness of his accusation, Leia freezes in shocked silence. The scene shifts to a flashback, showing an imposing, brightly lit castle against the night sky. Inside a grand hall, a royal family stands before guests as a voice narrates that it is his birthday. A younger, 7-year-old Charles Knightley shyly states there is no need for such a big party. A woman in a red gown, his mother, turns to his father with a smile, seeking his agreement. "Pat, Pat!" His father agrees with his wife as the crowd applauds the young boy. Declaring that the whole family needs to see him, his father's words make Charles blush with embarrassment. She affectionately pinches his cheek as he looks up at her, completely flustered. Pointing to her own cheerful expression, his mother advises him that a smile is always best. She playfully pinches his cheeks, urging him to smile for her. Standing between his proud parents, Charles forces a wide, happy grin for the family. The cheerful memory is shattered by a dark thought, his hatred for the urge to drink blood. The flashback turns into a nightmare as his father is shown attacking his mother in a bloody struggle. A young Charles watches in absolute horror, tears streaming down his face as tragedy unfolds. He stands alone amidst the carnage of his dead parents, realizing his bloodlust ruins everything. The memory shows a dark, faceless version of himself standing over the bodies, consumed by trauma. The flashback jumps forward, showing an older Charles training relentlessly with a sword to gain control. He pushes through exhaustion, determined to master himself so he will never be weak again. Now older, he reflects that his training works, but only if there are no humans around to tempt him. Back in the present, Leia looks down, having seemingly witnessed his painful memories. The view pans out, showing them sitting across from each other once more as the flashback ends. Charles resumes his interrogation, stating there must be a reason she knows so much about him. He unleashes a barrage of questions, asking how she knows about vampires, the dorm, and the academy itself. Leaning closer with piercing intensity, Charles asks the ultimate question, who really are you? Leia panics internally, knowing the truth, that this is a game and he's a character fated to die, is unbelievable. Charles softens his tone, admitting he doesn't believe she's an enemy, which catches her by surprise. However, he explains that her mere presence is a risk, as even a small injury to her could cause chaos. He concludes that whether she intends it or not, she is a danger to all vampires at the academy. Torn, Charles explains that, while he promised to protect her, his duty as dorm head is to his residents. Bowing his head in apology, he asks for her forgiveness, leaving her utterly confused. She stares back, her mouth agape, unable to process his sudden change in demeanor. Grab? Charles suddenly lunges across the table, pulling her toward him with startling force. A tear of fear escapes her eye as she is enveloped in a swirling magical aura. He commands her to look into his eyes, and she realizes with a jolt that she's seen this hypnosis scene in the game. She goes limp in her chair, falling under his spell as he stands over her. Her eyes glaze over as Charles notes to himself that her weakness to magic makes the hypnosis effective. He explains internally that this magic can extract information, but also risks surfacing forgotten, painful memories. The spell backfires as Leia screams in agony, clutching her head while dark energy crackles around her. Realizing the spell is hurting her, Charles resolves to get the information he needs quickly. He hesitates for a moment, questioning his actions and reminding himself she could still be an enemy. A faint, conflicted smile crosses his face as he makes his decision. Covering her eyes gently, he tells her to answer, reminding her that his spell prevents her from lying. Leaning in close, he demands that she tell him everything she has been hiding. With his hand covering her shadowed face, he presses his command, seeking the full truth. He slightly lowers his hand, his eyes narrowed as he waits for her confession. Breaking the intense silence, Leia calmly offers a shocking critique. His side profile is better than his front. Completely bewildered by her nonsensical response, Charles wonders if he misheard her. Thump. With sparkling eyes, she enthusiastically declares that Charles looks best from the side. She passionately explains that while most fans prefer Charles's front-facing pictures, she's always been on the side profile team. Still under hypnosis, she admits she kept her minority opinion a secret from everyone. Ugh. A blushing Charles listens as she gushes that his front-facing photos are a perfect 10, especially his frown. She grabs his collar as a chibi, prompting a flustered Charles to tell her to stop. Charles thinks to himself that the hypnosis didn't bring up painful memories as expected, so it was for nothing. With a bright smile, Leia concludes from what she's seen that he has had a nice life. Changing tactics, Charles asks what her purpose is, her expression shifting to one of surprise. Her thoughts darken as she considers her purpose, flashing to an image of a fallen, blood-spattered Charles. A soft glow emanates from her clenched fist. Charles reacts with wide-eyed shock, flatly saying no to what he's just seen in her mind. Tears stream down her face as she confesses her true purpose. I don't want you to die. He looks down, quietly absorbing the weight of her desperate plea. Pat! With a snap of his fingers, Charles releases the spell, musing that everyone has sad memories. Now free from the trance, a dazed Leia panics, wondering what she just revealed to him. He gently touches her cheek, drawing her gaze up to his. She thinks about all the questions she still has for him, but decides against asking. Charles softens his expression, telling her that's enough for today and thanking her for her cooperation. Utterly confused by his change in demeanor, she calls out his name. His face hardens once more as he declares a knight never breaks his promise, vowing to protect her for 1 week. Turning to leave, he warns her not to act recklessly, and she eagerly agrees. The moment he's gone, she clutches her head in a panic, desperately trying to remember what she said. As he walks away, Charles admits to himself that he still hasn't figured her out. Leia weeps in frustration, crying that she can't remember what happened. Charles resolves that if she's keeping a secret, he will eventually figure it out by watching her closely. He decides that when he sends her back, he will simply erase all her memories with a forgetting spell. Lying in a sun-drenched bed, Leia slowly begins to wake up. She recalls the whirlwind of events, starting with being suddenly thrown into the game world. She remembers being nearly eaten by vampires and how she prevented the tea disaster. Her memories conclude with the incident in the infirmary where Charles bit her neck. Gasp! She bolts upright in bed, jolted from her memories. Now at a desk, she begins to write, recounting the story's premise. A romance game with handsome vampires. The game's love interests include the mysterious Prince of Darkness. She sketches cute chibi versions of the 3 main romantic options. She recalls that the objective is to defeat the final boss, a woman named Carmilla, with a chosen vampire. However, the story's latest chapter ends with Charles being killed by Carmilla while protecting the protagonist. With grim determination, she acknowledges that she must deal with Carmilla, but there's a catch. The final showdown hasn't been released yet, and she realizes it's impossible to defeat Carmilla in just 1 week. An idea strikes her she considers an alternative to defeating the final boss: banishment. She reasons that if she can't defeat Carmilla, perhaps simply capturing her would be enough. In her imagination, a chibi Charles addresses a crowd, declaring that Carmilla is the root of all evil. She then imagines Charles confronting her, demanding to know how a mere human could know that, leaving her speechless. No. She buries her head in her arms, overwhelmed with frustration. Panicking, she debates telling the truth, fearing she will be called a lunatic and exiled from the academy. The scene transitions, showing white flowers blooming against a clear blue sky. In a grand hall the next day, She admits she fell asleep worrying all night. She pauses in the hallway, pondering her options as other students walk past. Lost in thought, she recalls fan theories suggesting Carmilla orchestrated all the game's chaotic incidents from the beginning. A chilling thought crosses her mind. Was the tea incident also Carmilla's doing? The menacing, smiling face of Carmilla appears, reflected in shattered glass. Leia gasps in shock. A sudden realization strikes her. She knows just the character who can help her succeed. She approaches two students in a hallway, but they nervously tell her to wait. Leia urgently explains she's in a hurry and needs to find someone. The two students stare after her, surprised to see a human in their dormitory. They conclude her presence must be Charles's decision, so there's nothing they can do. Leia feels like an unwelcome guest, noting that there are no classes scheduled for the day. Creak. She quietly opens a large door and peeks inside. Surveying the grand room, she wonders where the person she's looking for could be. An angry voice suddenly erupts, berating her for only just waking up. The furious man grabs her, shouting that she should have been awake long ago. Her face lights up with sheer delight upon seeing him. She joyfully calls out his name, Vanney. He proudly announces his title as the vice head of Gildray Dormitory. With a playful smile, she puts a hand up to stop his rant. She cheekily dismisses his grand title as something not worth remembering. They stand opposite each other in the lavishly decorated common room. A student tells her to sit and wait there until Charles returns. At the mention of Charles, Vanney's expression darkens with a sharp glare. Vanney flies into a rage, exclaiming how merciful Lord Charles is for housing her and assigning her a guard. A sly, knowing smile spreads across Leia's face. She celebrates internally, realizing her target came right to her. She identifies the tea-sipping Vanney as the potential ally she had considered. Although Vanney is strict, a flashback shows Charles trusts him completely. However, she knows Vanney is not someone who cooperates easily. With Charles absent, she realizes she can use the dorm's rules to her advantage. She confidently points at a bewildered Vanney, challenging him to a duel. With a determined glint in her eye, she declares her challenge once more. Vanney and the surrounding students are left utterly speechless by her sudden declaration. He glares at her, beginning to question her audacity. Vanney scoffs, asking if she even understands the rules, but she confidently affirms that she does. She explains the two primary rules. Both parties must agree, and it must follow the Gildray Dormitory Code. With a serious expression, she states the final rule. The winner gets one request from the loser. Vanney looks down, considering her challenge, as she pressures him not to refuse someone weaker. She clenches her fist, a determined and slightly manic grin on her face. She states her terms. If she wins, she needs Vanney's help with something. Vanney dismisses her offer, stating he needs nothing from her if she loses. He changes his mind, smugly demanding that if she loses, she must stay in her room for a week. His unexpected and restrictive condition leaves her momentarily stunned. Vanney angrily reminds her that the Gildray Dormitory is the most organized in the academy. He declares they can't tolerate a chaotic person like her, and his peers cheer in agreement. With gritted teeth, she accepts his terms, and he agrees to the duel. They take their places on opposite couches, surrounded by spectators, as the duel is about to begin. Leia smirks, already confident that she has a foolproof plan to win. Vanney holds up a pawn, revealing that their duel is simply a game of chess. Her confidence soars, knowing she can win because she's already familiar with Vanney's chess moves from the game. Vanney explains that as dorm head, Charles would normally decide the game. He announces that they will instead decide by a coin flip, leaving Leia completely shocked. Her plan crumbles as she stares in utter confusion, muttering about the unexpected coin toss. Vanney holds up a coin, explaining that if it lands on tails, they will play chess. Vanney declares that if the coin lands on heads, they will duel with swords, a suggestion that horrifies Leia. Panicked, Leia waves her hands, desperately trying to call a timeout. She suddenly remembers that in the original game, Charles was the one who suggested a chess match. Realizing she's altered the scenario, she watches in terror as her fate is now decided by a coin flip. Vanney watches the descending coin with a severe, unblinking gaze. Leia and the other students stare in wide-eyed shock at the outcome. Catching the coin, Vanney smirks and announces the verdict. It's swords. The crowd erupts in cheers as Leia remains frozen in disbelief. She laments internally, thinking this was supposed to have been an easy win. In a flashback, she sits on the ground in a tracksuit, crying in despair. However, she looks up from her despair with renewed determination, her eyes fixed on a rack of swords. A voice calls out to her, and she looks up to see Charles questioning her decision to challenge Vanney. Charles states firmly that he never would have allowed the duel to happen if he had been there. He explains that Vanney is the second best swordsman at the Academy, giving her almost no chance of winning, a fact she grimly accepts. Charles continues his critique, turning his disapproval on Vanney for accepting a challenge from someone as weak as her. Leia reflects that Vanney can't handle being provoked, and that his short temper is his greatest weakness. Charles turns back to her, seriously asking why she proposed a duel in the first place. With a gentle smile, she explains that there's a future she wants to see. Her heartfelt answer leaves Charles visibly surprised and moved. Back in the armory, she stands before the weapons rack, wondering which sword she should pick. Her eyes land on a massive broadsword as she excitedly notes how cool it looks. HMPH Charles scoffs as she struggles comically to lift the enormous weapon. Her absurd choice leaves Charles momentarily speechless. Stepping behind her, Charles suggests she use a more practical sword, guiding her hand to a smaller one. She blushes as he places a hand on her shoulder, his proximity catching her off guard. After a moment of thought, she seems to come up with a plan. Holding the lighter sword, she nervously wonders if she truly has to fight with it. She worries about the risk of injury, but trusts that Vanney understands the situation as well. In a flash of light, her tracksuit magically transforms into an elegant dueling uniform. Oh. She gasps in surprise at her sudden change of clothes. Charles advises her to be careful, revealing he has cast a spell on her that will block one attack. She looks at him gratefully and confirms she understands. She wonders if Charles is worried about her, feeling a bit proud. Bolstered by his support, she feels a newfound sense of courage. With a confident and determined smile, she feels ready for the challenge. On an outdoor veranda, the duel is about to begin as students gather to watch. Charles watches the proceedings with a stern and serious expression. Vanney stands opposite Leia, acknowledging that she has guts. He gives her one last chance to back out, saying she can declare defeat now and end things peacefully. She glances at Charles, realizing Vanney is offering her an honorable way out. Vanney confirms that he's giving her a chance to withdraw without fighting. She grins defiantly, stating she has her reasons not to back down, which prompts an annoyed Vanney to accept her challenge. Charles officially announces the start of the duel between Leia and Vanney Bannerworth. The two opponents face each other, prepared for battle. Charles watches the standoff with a tense, worried look. Vanney and Leia hold their intense gaze, the duel imminent. With a final word, the signal to begin the duel is given. Vanney immediately lunges forward, and their swords meet with a sharp clash. He presses his attack, yelling at her and asking what's the matter. As she struggles to defend, Vanney shouts that she can't possibly win by just blocking. In a flashback to the duel, a panicked Leia insists she only knows about sword fights from dramas. Vanney angrily declares he's disliked her ever since the entrance ceremony. He lists her offenses, sleeping during the ceremony, and daring to touch Charles's face. His final accusation rings out as he lunges. She's a mere human. Leia gasps as a sudden glint of light flashes before her eyes. Vanney stops his attack, demanding to know who she truly is. Her terrified face is reflected in the polished steel of his sword blade. The scene transitions, flashing back to a previous moment of contemplation. Last night, Leia was looking at herself in the mirror, deep in thought. She cups her face in her hands with a bright, surprised expression. She realizes her hair color is different from the protagonists in the game. Wondering if she's just a side character, she confirms to herself that she's a human, not a vampire. A sudden thought strikes Charles with the force of a revelation. Back in the duel, Vanney attacks as Leia reminds herself not to get distracted. She desperately wonders what she should do to defend herself. A smiling, ethereal figure with light hair appears in her mind amidst a cascade of blue roses. The spirit encourages a startled Leia, telling her she can do it. With her eyes now glowing gold, she steels her resolve, focusing solely on her opponent. Charles watches the sudden turn of events with a stunned expression. Leia confidently presses her attack, forcing a surprised Vanney to retreat. Vanney stares in disbelief, unable to counter her advance. With a swift move, she strikes his leg and disarms him, shocking him completely. Two onlookers from his dorm watch, in absolute astonishment, unable to believe what they're seeing. As the students question if Vanney is being overpowered, Leia herself looks shocked. Vanney grits his teeth, stunned by the power of this human. Leia's eyes gleam with power as she raises her sword for a final strike. She swings her sword with blinding speed and precision. "Damn it," Vanney curses in frustration as he is completely overwhelmed. A crowd of students watches the unbelievable display with open mouths. A flash of motion captures the speed and impact of the final blow. Leaping through the air, Leia lands a powerful kick, sending Vanney flying as his sword clatters away. A determined Charles prepares to declare the winner of the duel. Leia looks down at her hands, completely bewildered by what just happened. She reflects that it felt like she wasn't herself, the image of the ethereal figure still in her mind. A defeated Vanney lies on the ground, his sword just out of reach. Looking at her weapon, Leia realizes with a shock that not even the game's protagonist had such power. The scene shifts to a large ornate banner hanging in a grand hall. Light shines upon a portrait of a woman who bears a striking resemblance to Leia. A voice ponders which of the two is the real Leia. Back in the present, Leia looks at the stunned crowd, wondering if she actually won. Her bewilderment grows as she remembers she has never even held a sword before. The image of the encouraging spirit flashes again behind a wide-eyed Leia. Vanney regains his composure, looking at her with a new, serious expression. He admits he underestimated her, surprised a human could use a sword so well, as she stammers in response. She thinks back to the voice that guided her through the fight. Realizing there was more to her victory, she turns to address Vanney directly. She humbly tells a confused Vanney that she doesn't believe she's stronger than him. With a knowing smile, she asks him, "You were holding back, weren't you?" She correctly points out he didn't use his dominant hand, leaving Vanney utterly speechless. She confidently reveals she knows from the game that he only uses his left hand when he's truly serious. Leia correctly guesses he made sure she wouldn't get hurt and sincerely thanks Vanney. A flustered Vanney tells her to think whatever she wants. He regains his composure and declares that as a student of Gilles de Rais, he'll honorably fulfill her request. Leia smiles, pleased that her plan is working. They shake hands as Vanney formally admits his defeat, telling her she fought well. A crowd of students erupts in cheers. Amazed, she beat the vice director, who has only ever lost to Lord Charles. Charles watches the scene unfold with a thoughtful, serious expression. Vanney approaches his superior, respectfully addressing him as Lord Charles. Looking ashamed of his loss, Vanney sweats nervously. He offers Charles a deep, apologetic bow. Charles tells him it's fine as long as he learns from the loss, which Vanney affirms. As Leia is swarmed by admirers, Charles asks Vanney for his opinion of her. Vanney thoughtfully concludes that she is different from anyone he's met. Charles looks on, asking Vanney if he thinks so too. The scene transitions, showing the sun setting over the Academy Tower. Charles agrees with a smile, surprising Vanney with his affirmation. Deciding the duel is concluded, Charles prepares to wrap things up, and Vanney agrees. Charles watches Leia from afar, still processing his disbelief that she actually won. She excitedly calls out to Charles, prompting a frantic Vanney to pop in and demand she use his proper title. Charles explains that by proving her swordsmanship, she has fulfilled the core principle of the Gilles de Rais dormitory. A brilliant light envelops a shocked Leia. She finds herself magically dressed in the official Gilles de Rais uniform. Charles formally welcomes her to live as one of them for a week, as she internally celebrates just being alive. Touched by his acceptance, Leia looks up at him with gratitude. Charles turns to address the other students. He gets the attention of the assembled crowd. He orders them all to keep an eye on her to ensure she doesn't tarnish the dormitory's honor. The students salute in unison with a loud, "Yes, sir!" which startles her. Leia smiles, confident this brings her one step closer to getting rid of Carmilla. She resolves to ask Vanney for help with her plan that very night. In a quiet hall, Vanney asks Leia why she summoned him so late. She remains silent for a moment, gathering her resolve. Now in his pajamas, Vanney asks what favor she needs from him. She holds his hand, making her plea under a beautiful starry sky. Blushing furiously with his fangs exposed, Vanney shouts that she's a shameless woman. A man with blonde hair and glasses smiles while talking on his phone. Leia repeats her urgent need to sneak into the boys' dorm to Vanney's continued shock. They stand under a magical night sky filled with planets and shooting stars. A completely flustered Vanney stammers, at a loss for words. He explodes in embarrassment, calling her shameless again as she shushes him. Leia thinks to herself, believing her prediction about her foe is correct. Her plan is to catch Carmilla red-handed. She lays out the first step. They must catch the culprit behind the tea incident. She explains that Vanney can then use his hypnotic powers to uncover the link to Carmilla. She pictures a pensive Carmilla, who will surely be wondering why her scheme failed. Leia smugly celebrates her advantage, knowing she can predict Carmilla's moves thanks to her game knowledge. Confident in her plan, she declares it an easy win. She pauses, clasping her hands with a determined but slightly nervous expression, recalling a game scene of Charles asleep. She admits that while getting rid of Carmilla is her main goal, she has other priorities too. Approaching a young man in a nightcap, Leia addresses him as Vanney. She announces that she knows the identity of the tea incident culprit, stunning Vanney into silence. An impatient Vanney demands she hurry up and reveal who the culprit is. Plucking the nightcap from his head, she calmly reveals the culprit's name, Ivan Vasily. Now properly dressed, Vanney reveals he is the vice dorm leader and knows the location of every student. He confidently tells a surprised Leia that they are going to find him. With grim determination, Vanney leads them down the sparkling hallway. They arrive at a door, which Vanney promptly bursts through while shouting Ivan Vasily's name. Citing his authority as vice dorm leader, Vanney declares Ivan under arrest as Leia watches with giddy excitement. Her expression shifts to shock as her eyes reflect a scene of someone already being restrained. They stare in disbelief as they find Ivan already suspended in midair, bound by thorny rose vines. Looking up at the bizarre scene, they are left to wonder what could have possibly happened. The vines suddenly snap, and Vanney shouts for her to stay back as she instinctively calls out Ivan's name. Vanney manages to catch the unconscious Ivan as Leia realizes, with dawning horror, that this event was never in the game. Just then, Charles and several other students arrive. Witnessing the chaotic scene, Charles calmly assesses the situation and informs them that Ivan is merely unconscious. He immediately questions Vanney and Leia about their presence, leaving them comically flustered. Vanney quickly explains that they discovered a bottle of holy water in Ivan's closet. The revelation of the holy water hangs in the air, putting everyone on edge. Charles considers the evidence, thinking it points to Ivan's guilt, but feeling that something is amiss. He speculates that Ivan might have been silenced by an accomplice before he could talk. The other possibility dawns on him. Shocking Leia, Ivan may have been framed. Leia recalls a game scene where Charles stated that anyone who breaks the Knight's Code must be expelled. She realizes she needs to get information about Carmilla from Ivan before that happens. Pondering the complex situation, she silently considers her next move. Charles reveals that other strange incidents have plagued the dorm even before the tea poisoning. Connecting the dots, Leia suggests that all the incidents must be related. He confirms her suspicion, revealing that traces of the same flower magic were found at every crime scene. Vanney grimly affirms that the connection is undeniable. Flower magic, a voice explains, is the ability to summon and control plants. The catch, however, is that this specific magic is a specialty of the Bathory dormitory students. The horrifying truth hits her. Flower magic is Carmilla's specialty. She reflects on her strategy of using her game knowledge to outwit her opponent. Her entire plan was built on staying one step ahead of Carmilla's schemes. But now, with Ivan silenced before she could act, she realizes her plan has utterly failed. A chilling image of Carmilla's knowing, menacing expression flashes in her mind. Leia is gripped by the terrifying thought that Carmilla has been outmaneuvering her the entire time. A person with blonde hair smiles while talking on the phone. A small, blushing chibi is displayed on a supporter recognition page. A promotional card displays the Scanlation Group's name and motto. Feeling ensnared, Leia is surrounded by a thicket of ominous, thorny vines. She realizes her plan to make the culprit confess their connection to Carmilla has been completely thwarted. The truth sinks in as a smug. Carmilla sips tea. The story has gone off script, and the villain is in control. She admits to herself that she gravely underestimated Carmilla, who is a far tougher opponent than in the game. Overcome with anxiety, she desperately tells herself not to lose hope. A forgotten phrase echoes in her mind, reminding her that limits are not for one to decide. The thought triggers a flashback to her previous life, and a moment she remembers as being deeply unfair. She recalls crying in frustration after buying 30 gotcha badges and failing to get her favorite character even once. Crying out at the unfairness of the terrible odds, she holds up 2 of her unwanted prizes. However, she remembers her resolve, vowing to obtain her favorite prize through her own efforts. In a flashback, a voice of encouragement asks a tearful woman why she's giving up so soon. Suddenly, she looks up from the ground to see a confident, red-haired woman walking past her. The woman, identified from a social media profile as Lady Bradbury, dismisses her concerns. Lady Bradbury consoles her, dismissing low odds and budget problems with some gambler's logic. Reinvigorated by her words, the woman eagerly prepares to buy 20 more chances. Her gamble pays off, as she proudly displays 2 prize pins of Charles. Back in the present, Leia beams with pride at her successful deduction as Vanney looks on. Vanney remains silent, lost in his own troubled thoughts. Charles considers the theory, noting that floral magic isn't exclusive to any single dorm students. His expression darkens as he focuses on what he believes is the real issue. He voices his concern. The true mystery is how anyone acquired holy water, shocking Leia and Vanney. Leia recalls that even in the game, the source of the holy water remained an unsolved plot point. She flashes back to the crying woman, remembering a key detail. Lady Bradbury was wearing a ring. Ah, the memory of the red-gemmed ring triggers a shocking realization for Leia. Turning to Charles, she asks if he knows anything about Lakia's potential involvement. Vanney smirks, praising the human's deduction, much to Leia's confusion. Leia remembers that Lakia's family is infamous for its connections to the underworld. It's a common rumor that his family's vast wealth can procure anything for a price. Vanney furiously concludes that Lakia must have sold holy water to the students. Charles looks down with a grim expression, contemplating Lakia's likely role in the incident. Without warning, Vanney bolts from the room to confront Lakia. A panicked Leia desperately calls for Vanney to stop. She watches in amazement as Vanney speeds down the corridor with incredible haste. Annoyed, Charles realizes Vanney is making a beeline for the teleportation device. Leia sprints after him, struggling to recall what the device even is. As Vanney steps onto a glowing circle, Charles explains it's a restricted teleportation device. Charles calls out as Leia finally catches Vanney, grabbing onto his arm to stop him. She desperately tries to restrain him, shouting that Charles is worried, but he demands she let go. Vanney vows to catch the culprit, forcing a facepalm from Charles as Leia protests his assumptions. Leia gasps as the teleportation pattern on the floor begins to glow, signaling its activation. Sensing the danger, Charles urgently reaches out, telling her to give him her hand. He manages to grab her hand just as the light intensifies, surprising them both. Charles looks down in alarm as the teleportation magic surges around them. Leia loses her footing, screaming an apology to Charles as she falls backward. The teleportation circle erupts in a brilliant flash of light. Wah! With a final scream, she vanishes into the light. She tumbles through a vortex of light, arriving in a lavish red room where Lakia looks up, intrigued. Ouch. She lands directly on top of a surprised Lakia. Lying on a sofa beneath her, Lakia looks up with a predatory grin, welcoming his blood bag. A promotional image is displayed. In order to create a lasting memory, you need to think about the emotions you want to evoke. Do you want your audience to feel inspired, joyful, or perhaps a sense of wonder? Once you've identified the core emotion, you can then start to craft your message and visuals around it. Remember, it's not just about what you show, but how you make people feel. Leia sits up, surprised that her rough landing didn't hurt. Now sitting on his lap, she watches as Lakia greets her before dismissively calling her a walking blood bag. His strange comment leaves Leia utterly bewildered. Suddenly, Charles's voice cuts through the tension, calling out Lu's name as he appears in the room. Startled, Leia turns to face him, still flustered from her position on Lakia's lap. A hand reaches out toward a stunned Leia. Lakia taunts her for calling another man's name, but she panickedly tries to explain. Charles plucks a tiny chibi Leia off Lakia by her collar and calmly tells her to ignore him. Lakia scoffs, annoyed at their audacity for barging into his dormitory and treating him with such disrespect. A red-haired, fanged man named Lakia Bradbury is introduced with a confident smirk. As one of Twilight Academy's 3 dormitory directors, he is known for being hot-tempered but charismatic. He leads Tepe's dormitory, also called the Kingdom of Kings, represented by the Vlad Tepe's crest. Unlike the Gilles de Ray's dorm, Tepe's dormitory values raw strength and status above all else. The rivalry between the dorms is fierce, especially between their opposing directors, Charles and Leia. Standing between the two rivals, Leia looks up with anticipation as Vanney glares down in anger. Whirling around, Vanney furiously accuses a nonchalant Leia Bradbury. Vanney erupts in rage as a tiny Leia comically attempts to hold him back. He accuses Leia of trying to poison Charles with holy water, a charge that merely piques Leia's curiosity. Leia smirks at a stone-faced Charles, tauntingly asking if he was foolish enough to drink it unknowingly. Vanney seethes with frustration, with Leia struggling behind him. As Leia desperately restrains the frantic Vanney, a weary Charles calls out his name. With a flick of his wrist, Charles calmly tells Vanney to settle down. He transforms into a tiny, adorable bat, leaving Leia utterly speechless. She stares in disbelief, shocked that he actually turned into a bat. The bat familiar now rests on Charles's shoulder as he calmly observes the scene. Leia watches the unfolding drama with a sly, calculating expression. Whoa! He suddenly grabs Leoria's hand, offering to talk in exchange for a taste of her blood. Leia lets out a flustered shriek of utter disbelief. Sternly, Charles warns Leia that he's had enough, but Leia only scoffs in response. Bam! To everyone's surprise, Leia strikes Leia's chest with her palm. She furiously tells Leia to stop provoking Charles without reason. Pointing accusingly, she confronts him directly, asking if he was the culprit behind the poisoning. She recalls from the game that Leia honors strength, refusing to fight Charles unless he was at his best. Based on his code of honor, she confidently declares that Leia fights head-on and wouldn't resort to tricks. Her accurate assessment leaves Leia momentarily stunned and speechless. A smirk returns to his face as he agrees to tell her about the holy water. With a predatory grin, Leia challenges a stoic Charles to a duel. Leurix's eyes light up with excitement, realizing this was his true intention all along. Charles, however, immediately and flatly rejects the challenge. A narration explains that their opposing powers of ice and fire are so evenly matched that neither will risk defeat. As Leia thoughtfully considers the situation, a disappointed Leia looks away. Leia clarifies that his challenge wasn't for Charles. He points directly at a stunned Leia, declaring that she will be his opponent. His finger is aimed squarely at the bewildered Leia, who points back at herself in confusion. A promotional card features a blue-eyed, blood-splattered woman in a dark, atmospheric setting. Leia reiterates his challenge with a confident smirk. Duel him for the information. He points once more, confirming that Leia is the one he intends to fight. The shocking demand leaves Leia utterly flabbergasted. Leia reveals he's heard she's a human who already managed to defeat Vanney in a duel. He confidently pressures her, implying she has no choice but to accept if she wants answers. Leia stands frozen, silently weighing the dangerous proposition. She recalls Leia's fearsome reputation for sending all his opponents to the infirmary. A notorious battle junkie, he's rumored to have brutally defeated every upperclassman who dared challenge him. He then displayed their defeated bodies at the gates, a terrifying thought that makes her question dueling him. Charles steps forward, questioning Leia's seriousness and reminding him that she is only a human. Leia finds the idea of a human defeating a vampire thrilling, which only fuels his desire to fight her. Stepping between them, Charles protectively declares that he will not allow the duel to happen. Leia dismisses his authority, reminding him that they are in Tepe's territory, where his permission means nothing. Charles defers to Leia, stating the final decision is hers to make. Torn, she realizes she desperately needs the holy water information from Leia. She frantically searches for a way to defeat Leia in a duel. A spark of inspiration hits her as she formulates a plan. Stepping past a concerned Charles, Leia firmly accepts the duel. She adds a condition with newfound confidence. She gets to decide the game. Leia smugly agrees, but warns her against boring games like chess or kickball. Leia smiles, knowing she has chosen a game she is certain to win. She dramatically presents a folded paper fan, declaring it the weapon for their game. When she reveals a top hat as the shield, a baffled Lakia asks what on earth it is. With a flourish, she announces they will play the game of the contradictory spear and shield. A chibi illustration explains that the winner attacks while the loser must defend. She grimly concludes that the game continues until someone's head is split open. Lakia remains completely unfazed by her bizarre and violent explanation. Lakia questions her bizarre choice, causing her to panic internally, realizing it's essentially high-stakes rock, paper, scissors. Finding her nerve amusing, Lakia grins and agrees that her strange game sounds fun. She's utterly shocked and flustered that he actually accepted her ridiculous terms. As the weapons sit on the table, she reveals the true reason for her choice. She recalls a crucial piece of information. Lakia always throws rock first. Confident in her knowledge, she knows throwing paper will guarantee her victory. Lakia menacingly threatens to send her head flying, but a tiny Leia defiantly retorts back. With a determined clench of her fist, Leia prepares for the showdown. Lakia smirks confidently, getting into position for the game. They both throw their hands, initiating the game of rock, paper, scissors. She beams with excitement, seeing that he threw rock just as she had predicted. With her paper covering his rock, she celebrates her secured victory. Lakia looks up in shock as she brings the paper fan down for the winning strike. A tiny, triumphant Leia hangs in the air, ready for her win. Whack! Lakia smiles deviously as a chibi Leia is sent flying from an unexpected blow. To her horror, Lakia has caught her fan and is now hitting her with it instead. He declares himself the winner, prompting an outraged Leia to insist he can't break the rules. Lakia nonchalantly dismisses her complaints, showing no regard for the rules she just explained. He smugly states she should have explained it better, leaving her to despair at his tyranny. Watching from the side, Charles dismisses the chaotic scene with a sigh. Lakia collapses in laughter, admitting he was entertained and musing the game could be useful. Amused by her antics, Lakia offers a deal. He might investigate the holy water if he feels like it. Lulor's face lights up with joy as a tiny Lakia calls it a favor. Overjoyed, she happily calls out to Lakia as she prepares to leave. With a radiant smile, she thanks him and reminds him about his promise. Lakia is left looking slightly stunned by her cheerful and earnest gratitude. As they depart, he silently wonders why she would thank him after he cheated so blatantly. Feeling closer to solving the mystery, Leia tells Charles their next stop. Declaring they're off to Bathory's dormitory, the scene shifts to a red-haired woman in a hat. A handsome blonde man sits surrounded by golden roses, calmly reading a book. The red-haired woman sips her tea as the man asks if something is the matter. She smiles mysteriously, suggesting they might soon have an intriguing guest, hinting at Luria's arrival. Experience an unforgettable adventure to the world's most breathtaking destinations, all while enjoying exclusive discounts on flights and accommodations. Whether you dream of exploring ancient ruins, relaxing on pristine beaches, or hiking through lush forests, we have the perfect getaway for you. Our curated selection of travel packages ensures a seamless and memorable journey, tailored to your preferences. Discover hidden gems and iconic landmarks with expert guides, savor local cuisines, and immerse yourself in vibrant cultures. Book now and make your travel dreams a reality. Limited time offers available.